Hi friends, it's Derek here, talking with famous people. I've been motivated to make another video based on some of these comments on the DaveSuperPowers video. So this comment, LJ's comment here is very instructive about what's wrong with DSP's method. And I'm confident this actually represents what he has to say about it, but I'm ready to be standing corrected. Anyway, regardless, it's a minor thing. But the difference between TE and FE and the OP method from your comment, some company designs a new tablet. These tablets are really cool. They project 3D images, have a super stellar design, were used in an ad with a celebrity, have automatic popularity status. They're FE liked. However, the functionality of the tablet is limited. There isn't any real-world application that makes them useful on a regular basis. They don't integrate well with other current technology and don't really solve any problems that are left void by other items on the market. They don't TE work in reality. So that's how something can be FE liked but not TE work by the general consensus. Okay, first of all, universalism comes from NI, not from TE. SITE barely knows how to use its phone, is what I said there. But I'm talking about, like, ISTJs are not good with computers. Because SITE doesn't do well with the how-tos of the universalist framework of the internet and computers and stuff, right? NITE does well with that. So, and also remember, and this is most important, TE is not in a thing or a solution, it's in a person. So, what DaveSuperPowers is trying to draw a distinction here between is aesthetics and functionality. Except, the problem with that is it's reflective of a failure to recognize that things are either beautiful or useful to a person. Now, the thing is, it may be true that something is beautiful or useful in a universal sense, but that's an NI kind of knowing, not an FE or TE kind of knowing. SI is a kind of knowing that says, this is useful or beautiful to me from my experience. But more importantly, I made a little list here, and let's go down this, because to explain any of this stuff requires I explain a fair amount of stuff. And I think it's all pretty straightforward, really. But the thing you'll note is that it all makes sense. Okay? So we have to start with the reality that people exist in real time and have experiences, and they also have information they keep track of. Which means there are two forms of time, as I said in the previous video. We have real-time experience. If I hit my hand on this thing, ow, I feel the pain of it or the impact of it. But if I say words about it, I'm referencing that in a not real-time way, right? So the symbol may represent an hour and just be one word. Say, last week was a hard week for me. I'm talking about 7 days. And I'm giving you information about a full 7 days, but I'm only compressing it down to just little words. So we have to acknowledge that's true, first and foremost. That we have two manners of dealing with time. Sequential, which is objective or word-based. Things are binary. They're defined as this or not that, and they have statuses. In real experience, it's not quite like that. The experience is the experience. It's not some imperfect representation of it. So, which leads us to the concept of bandwidth. That in order to store information and deal with information and process information, we have a limited amount of bandwidth. And for people who are FI, TE, SE, and SI, those are real-time functions. They're high-res functions. They require more bandwidth because they're not dealing with symbols, they're dealing with actualities. Low bandwidth functions are TI, FE, NI and NE, because they deal with symbols and meanings. So there's a distinction between meanings, which is to say, which are forms of objects. Objects are things that have binary definition in the real world and that have physical attributes in the physical world. I mean, in the metaphysical world first. But the point is, words are objects, and they're objects with defined limits in the same way that objects in physical space have defined limits. Songs are objects. Songs you might even call entities. But the point is, I don't want to get off track here, that this is a world in which we're dealing, this is the actual existence that each of us is dealing with. That cognitive functions are manners of being. So when we make symbols of them, we have to remember that they're a manner of being you. It's a manner of being you. That's a cognitive function. Objective subjective. Therefore, objective subjective is about the nature of the manner of being. And it can refer to lots of things. Right now, I'm engaging you in an objective way on one level simply because I'm using words. But you might say that my words are adjudicated objectively because I'm comparing the words against other words. So I'm comparing something you can access out here against something else you can access out here. And I'm not comparing anything against something only I can access in here. I'm, in other words, dealing only in low-resolution material, symbols of things, not the things themselves. So that's what makes it objective. Now, if I were then using my interested calculus to make decisions about what I think ought to be the construction of the intellectual scaffolding I present, for example, then I'd be motivated to defend my ideas even if they ran afoul of contradiction. Then you, in that instance, you'd say my calculus was subjective because I prioritized my interested motivation over my disinterested motivation. So, okay, once we've made those definitional distinctions that are important to make, and you can see that you can use those definitions of objective and subjective meaningfully. And they're quick definitions, but they explain it all. Number 3, thing, solution, person. So, again, we have to remember that TE, FE, TI, whatever, they are not in things, they are not in solutions, they are ways of being a person. And that all cognitive functions are inside of a single person. That any expression of reality that we can think of or know or claim to understand is always an expression of an observer being. Okay, there was a question from Curtis about SI versus NI and how they organize memory or whatever. Well, it links to that high-res, low-res thing. NI is low-res, which means it keeps track of the meaning of experiences, not the details of them, and not the video from it. If you can think back to an experience you've already had and remember visuals, remember moments in it clearly, and know the progression of how that given event occurred. Now keep in mind, SI doesn't remember everything. For SI to remember something, you've got to have it defined as an event of some sort, an occurrence. And like, not everything gets defined as an occurrence. The fact that I'm bouncing my knee right now is an occurrence only because I noted it. And I was bouncing my knee earlier and didn't note it and won't remember it. So making note of things and tagging them like that is what catalyzes SI into remembering things. Some things, of course, propel you to make meaning about them and thus classify them or give them shape so that SI can store them and then retrieve it as needed. Now, SI is not something like a computer folder that you can look through. It's an associative memory process whereby a given circumstance right now will link associatively to previous experiences, and certain stimuli will prompt those associative things to float to the surface. The things that are associated float to the surface, which is why one quality that I've always had, which is I've always found kind of amazing, is when I'm arguing with somebody about something, I will remember something they said very precisely from a previous conversation, if and only if the need arises because they've said something contradictory here. So the contradiction prompts the association to the original thing, and I remember it like word for word. But I don't remember lots of other things, because what SI remembers depends on what the individual prioritizes in their meaning-making processes. So if the person is prioritizing a lot of negative stuff, they're going to remember a lot of negative stuff. If they're making a lot of negative meaning about a lot of things, they're going to prioritize a lot of negative experience remembering. NI, however, takes the whole experience and collapses it down to universal meanings. So the experience wasn't the experience, it was its impact on a meaning level, how it impacted statuses, and then statuses about what that informs the person, how that informs the person's understanding of processes and how they evolve over time. So SI is predicting one way, NI is predicting another way. Both knowledge functions are there to predict and to provide a bypass over judgment. So it's like you can't go through life processing everything. Most stuff has to be on the implicit knowledge level. Like, I don't need to, if I have to go through life, like I look at a doorknob and I have to think, what is that thing and what does it do? Oh, that's right, it's round, it's blah, so therefore it's a doorknob, and if I turn it this way then it will open. That's right, that's what I do. That would be a very difficult way to go through life if you had to figure everything out again and again and again and again, right? So you have to have some shit that you packed away as done. Now everybody utilizes functions like SI and NI especially on a root level. That's the same for I think everybody. It's like we all put away into our SI memory banks basic autopilot shit like that early on, big stacks of it. That's not really specific to our own life, but this kind of universal. You might say that we put it in NI, that we understand what it's for and does without having to think about it, without having to actively know in any sense. It's automatic. So those kind of things are I guess part of early childhood that we don't, that comprise ultimately our autonomic consciousness, which is to say it's not subconscious, but it's autonomic. Is that the word, autonomic? Yeah, I think so. It's like breathing. It'll do it automatically, but you can be aware of it too. So through metacognition. Anyway, let's go on to the next thing. Knowledge functions and prediction. I kind of went into that. So NI predicts by knowing the way that processes work in the world. SI predicts by extrapolating out from experience. For an NE DOM with SI in the fourth slot like me, I'm much closer to NI than I am to SI in terms of valuings and in terms of some aspect of utility. So at this point, I guess you have to mention aspects, which is in number 8. The thing is, because everybody operates both on real time and sequential time like that, each of the functions has an aspect you use, which is not really a great way to say it, but you use extroverted intuition in a real-time capacity, and you use it in a cross-time capacity, and the same for every other function. but each of those functions is most comfortable or most at home, most naturally placed in one or the other. So the intuitions are both naturally placed in the turn-based kind of time or the low-resolution time, as are introverted thinking and extroverted feeling. Those are the objective functions because they deal in objects most naturally. Now, each of those has its real-time aspect as well that's less effective and less comfortable. I can use extroverted intuition in real time means I'm like nailing this thing to that thing to make a little half-assed jury-rigged kind of stand for something. That's me using extroverted intuition in real time. Or, dremeling a little carving. That's extroverted intuition in real time for me because I'm just playing around with different ideas, basically. But note that the huge difference is in sequential time, I can undo stuff, or I can change what I just did real easy. Like, even before computers or before word processing programs or anything like that, if I was just talking, I could say, check that, I misspoke, let me redo. But whereas if I accidentally cut the head off my figurine that I'm carving, it's a whole different story. So that's why NE is so much more comfortable in metaphysical space or sequential time, because it's using language and represent symbolic representations of everything, where you can do a lot of conditionality work. So it's also very comfortably matched with TI because they're both in the sequential time space. So that's that. Now, regarding the inductive, deductive, AFNEG, effectiveness, legitimacy thing, this is about a TETI thing. It is absolutely a mistake to say that the introverted thinking of people who are referring to a internal metric of decision making that is conditional logic. It is absolutely wrong to think that could possibly be inductive. TI, introverted thinking, refers to the process of choosing to adjudicate a given problem in front of you, first and foremost in its symbolic manifestation. Let's not resolve this with our fists, let's resolve this by talking. And second of all, by saying, let's take this problem away from you two who are about to fist fight, hear both of your grievances, and have a third objective party who's disinterested decide that. That's the model of TI. And it's when you do that yourself, you pretend you're that third objective party about your own shit and about everything, then you're TI heavy in your attentional manner. It means, as a manner of being, when I go to judge something, I try to judge it from a third party's perspective, consistently over time. And so what that lends itself to is the conditional logic approach, which is to say, if this is not logically valid, or if you're logically valid but inconsistent with yourself, then I ought choose the one that's least inconsistent and that's most valid. Because that's sort of the only way to validate things on a third party level. We can't point to experience. Like if I go into the hospital and I've got my arm hanging from a thread right here and blood's gushing out all over the place, okay? Now Steve's here and he's broken his toe. And, it stopped hurting a while ago because it's been broken for a day or two, but still, he needs to get it fixed. Steve was here first. I go into the hospital and I go, take me in and fix me. And Steve goes, whoa, I was here first. Okay. Now, that's one of the circumstances where you'd say, let's not use symbolic representations to adjudicate this. It's true that we could stand there and have a conversation where Steve says, well, you need to establish that simply because your situation is more urgent, that means you should be prioritized. Because I'm saying I've been waiting here for quite a while, and I should be prioritized. I was next in line. I've been waiting just fine. You can wait. Why should I? Why should it be more important for you to get in there than me? You don't know that my toe's not going to fall off in a moment too. It could. We don't know that. I haven't seen the doctor. How would I know? I could make all those TI arguments, but that's a situation where we shouldn't use TI to judge something. That the doctor should simply say, I don't need to hear the arguments. I can see the level of urgency. Plus, he's getting blood all over the place. I'm taking this guy. But the thing is, he doesn't need to even do that, right? He doesn't need to use words to do that. It's just obvious. And it's obvious in an SE NI sense. So, that it's not always a good idea to use TI to judge things. And TI can be used ridiculously, as I indicated in that example, right? So, yes, TI is deductive. That doesn't make it necessarily right. It just means that it's remember that disputes occur between people. They don't occur in the abstract. They don't occur between ideas. They occur between people. And so, and problems occur for people. It's not necessarily the case that you're going to find your life goes better if you personally choose to evaluate everything according to a logical metric. It is the case that you'll probably find an easier time in discursive environments of academia and stuff like that, and certain other things that are generally prioritized as highfalutin or desirable by society, like being smart and going to college and stuff like that. But, I mean, personally, I think college is a huge waste of time, and I don't think really anybody should go to college. And it's not, if you're going into debt to go to college, it's not even a good economic investment. Something I've said many times before, I got scolded for it the other day. Like, you're being irresponsible. No, I'm telling the goddamn truth. Arithmetic. Inductive reasoning, TE, is, and TE is not exactly inductive reasoning. I mean, look, the distinction between deductive and inductive reasoning is itself a TI distinction to make. It's a definitional distinction between words establishing kinds of thinking, and TE is affirmative. It's looking to accomplish something with its logic. And TI is negationary. It's looking to parse away the wrongness. TE is about effectiveness, but TI is about legitimacy. So I need to know something is legitimate and assume then that that's the thing to do, and don't really take into account a lot of times effectiveness, or really assume that's the thing not to do because it's not legitimate. I'm about, let's not do the wrong thing. And TE is about, let's do the right thing. So, 7, manner of being versus metaphor. I touched on that already. We got to remember that these functions are manners of being. They are not external to us. The things were, like, to say that extroverted sensing means, or that I'm, like, I'm going to be extroverted sensing right now. Alright, so all I'm doing is I'm listening to all the different sounds I can hear, and I'm kind of looking around, seeing what I can see, and feeling what I feel with my body. That's real-time extroverted sensing, to the extent that I'm focused on what's outside of me, not my comfort level. I'm introverted sensing in the real time and thinking, okay, well, am I comfortable? How can I'm focused on my body in this little space, and like I'd probably want to clean up this shit in front of me, make it look all nice and tidy, and all that kind of stuff. That's real-time SI, but that's just like its most primitive incarnation, and we can understand each of the functions best as, varying incarnations of complexity built off of that basic distinction between in the moment versus, high resolution versus representational low resolution across time. And that's going to be about subtypes. Oh yeah, if you're going to have subtypes, there's going to be an aspect variety to it. But I don't see the purpose of it, and I'm just not, it just seems to, it seems a way of excusing flaws in what you got going on a little bit. Because, look, it may be the case, I have a theory about aspects, which is that you prefer the same aspect as your dominant function's natural aspect in all functions except the seventh, in which you prefer the alternative. Now, what I mean by prefer there is that you find it more comfortable operating in the aspect of your dominant function. So, for example, I find SI more native to me in some regard when I'm doing categorization of meanings, when I'm organizing meanings I've already made. Now, homeboy, DaveSuperPowers, he talks about SI being, I think he says SI and NI are organized. SI is very organized. NI is not organized. NI sort of eliminates that step, and it just says, let me just have kind of by osmosis pull from experience the universal meanings of it and toss away all the high resolution stuff. It's the most compressed form of being that kind of, of knowing via experience. And because of that, it's low resolution and sequential and whatever else, and universalist. So you could say that somebody who's an NI-DOM might violate my rule that I provided there, which is that you always function better in the native aspect and actually function better in the physical aspect of SE than in the metaphysical aspect of it, for example. But I don't think there's a whole lot of hay to be made down that road, and it seems of diminishing returns the further inward you tree the thing rather than outward and upward. So anyway, I don't know if that last little bit was clear. I just don't buy into this subtype shit. I just don't buy it, and I don't think it's necessary. So DaveSuperPowers thinks that TE is deductive and TI is inductive. And the reason is because of this shit that LJ said, probably. And the reason this stuff is wrong is because, if you think about it, if in fact these tablets don't integrate well with other technology and don't solve any problems that are left void by other items on the market, then the reason the TE on them was bad is because the goal of the company making them was to sell product to make a lot of money. If they sold a lot of products and made a lot of money, then they had good TE. It was a good way to get to their goal of making a lot of money. If they didn't, then they didn't. But that's the point, is the distinction you're drawing between utility and aesthetics is one that is individuated, and it's not contained within the thing itself like you want it to be. So that's the end of this video. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese, and hopefully this was clarifying. Somebody's like, have 10 of your students debate 10 of his students. Like, I don't have any students. I've got people who yell at me.